Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of February 22nd. On our agenda tonight are sewer and water budgets and other related articles for sewer and water. Welcome to the meeting. We are still operating, excuse me, we are still operating under the governor's executive order that supersedes open meeting laws that requires we can meet Zoom, but in order to do so, all votes need to be roll call votes. So to get us officially open, I'm going to do attendance. Please say aye when you hear your name. Denny?
Aye.
Little louder.
Aye.
Thank you. Josette?
Aye.
Allie?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Kathleen?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Mark Sullivan?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Myself, and just for the record, Susan Lawson? Not yet. And Lucy Rowanowitz? Not yet. So we have 12. Alrighty. On to, okay, Jim, did you want to make some opening comments since you weren't here last week? I wasn't sure if there was anything you wanted to update us on.
No, just that what you have tonight is the sewer and water budgets. You're set to discuss articles 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
I'm hoping everyone had a chance to look over the memo that I provided. I'm sure you're going to have some questions about the rates and the proposed items. I did review and briefly discuss the budget with the sewer and water commissioners this afternoon. I advised them that they are going to need to make a decision as far as the rates, whether or not they want to leave an almost 12% increase for the water side and about a 12% increase in the sewer side, or whether or not they want to use some retained earnings to assist with offsetting that. So with that, Mark, I'd like to just kind of hand it off to Bernie Marshall, our superintendent of water and sewer.
Okay, I just want to get a clarification real quick before we start. We can vote the budgets, but we can hold off and vote the funding sources later.
Yes, and that's what I'd like to request, because they haven't advised me as to what they want to use as far as retained earnings and everything.
So if our deliberations go favorably and we determine that the budgets are respectable budgets and should be implemented, we can vote the budgets, and at a later date just vote the funding sources after sewer and water meet and determine their process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, Mark, I'd like to kind of hand it off to Bernie before we open it up for questions on these items.
Sure.
So I'm sorry, Article 7 and 9 are the in-year sewer and water budget adjustments. At this time, I'm recommending nothing happen on that. I'd like to wait to see as we get closer to town meeting. Right now, our projections are showing us off just about 1 or 2% to meet what we budgeted. So that's such a small margin of error. I'd like to wait as long as possible on those two articles. Okay. So with that, I'll hand it off to Bernie Marshall.
Yep.
All right. Can I? Thanks, Jim.
Let's let Bernie start, and then we can get into detailed questions. Thanks.
So I just have a brief synopsis of both Article 8 and Article 10, my water and my sewer operation budgets. So right in front of you tonight, I have my salaries for the water budget. And this section of the budget includes the salaries of 10 public works and 3 clerical employees that are assigned to the water department, the salaries of the assistant superintendent, as well as 1/2 of the salaries for the Board of Water and Sewer Commission's secretary and the department superintendent, and a portion of a part-time principal clerk's position. They're also accounted for in this budget. The operational and maintenance expenses are actually for 168 miles of water main piping, 8,175 water connections, 1,425 hydrants, 1,540 valves, 18 wells, 4 booster stations, 6 water storage tanks, 2 water treatment facilities, and 8 pressure regulating valves. This section of the budget includes all the expenses that are necessary and required to operate and maintain the water system. It also includes expenses that are necessary to maintain compliance with the federal and state drinking water regulations, the EPA and the DEP. This year's budget is proposed to increase by $25,570, or 1.5% over the fiscal year 2021 budgeted amount of $1,628,060. Some of the lines have been adjusted to reflect the needs of the department. Most notably, the increase is to professional and technical services. And this is directly related to a mandated monitoring. And I'm going to try not to butcher the name of this chemical or these chemical substances. They're polyfluoroalkyl substances, or better known to most lay people as PFAS. And also the water management mitigation that we have in process with Wright Pierce and the DEP. The total expense request for this fiscal year 22 budget is $1,653,630. And that's Article 8 for the water budget. Article 10 for the sewer budget. The salaries of this section of the budget include the salaries of 3 public work employees, 1 clerical employee, and they are all assigned to the the sewer department. Also included in this is 1/2 the salary of the Board of Water and Sewer Commission secretary, the department superintendent. It also includes a portion of the salary of a part-time principal clerk. The salary request here is $308,182. The operational maintenance expenses are for the sewer, 93 miles of sewer line, 5,750 connections, 8 sewer pumping stations, and a septic receiving facility. And this section of the budget includes all the expenses that are necessary and required to operate and maintain the sanitary sewer system of Walpole. This year's requested budget is proposed to increase by $176,109, or 4.4% over fiscal year 2021. As in the past, the most significant factor is the associated cost with the Mass Water Resource Authority, what they assess us for our septic disposal. And with that, I will open it up to any questions you have on. We'll start with the water budget, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, let's start with Article 8. We'll wrap up with 7 and 9, which are the current year budgets. Let's get through the next year budgets first. So Article 8, questions? Denny, did you want to chime in first?
I had a procedural question, so we'll deal with it later.
Okay. Quick question. I noticed that we have salaries going down. Do we have a vacancy that we plan on replacing at a lower rate?
I don't have a vacancy. Well, I have 1 vacancy as a pump station operator at this time that we have not filled.
Okay. Are we just carrying that as a part year position because we won't have it filled at the start of the year? Because I noticed that this.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I noticed that the actual labor line was going down on that particular category. So I wasn't sure if we were just like we're budgeting part of a year, or it's just that the position is going to get filled at a lower rate than last year.
We also had a retirement, so we filled that vacancy, and we have another laborer that came on board that's actually less salary than what the original laborer that was working for us. And I believe there's some longevity that also has elapsed.
Okay, thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, this is Rick Mattson.
Sure, Rick.
To follow up with what Bernie said, we reduced the public works side of the budget by 1 position. And what we did was we refunded a part-time principal clerk that Bernie had previously mentioned. So we're actually down 1 full-time position, but we added 18 hours back in the form of a principal clerk. It was just a restructuring of the department to better fit the needs of what we needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Yep. Danny, did you just put your hand up?
Nope.
No. Okay.
I think Andrew's got a question.
Okay, Andrew. and then Mark.
Hi, my question is from the memo that Jim sent. I see that there are the 12% increases in the water and sewer rates. And in this memo, it says that these rates are substantial because over the last 10 plus years, the rates voted on by the commissioners have not accurately reflected the true cost to run the sewer and water operations in Walpole. And I just wanted to ask, is this going to catch us up over? Is this going to make up for that, or is it a kind of a multi-year phase in? And also, if we can talk a little bit more, I apologize if in past years you've explained it, but just to explain why that was the case. Is this a new realization, or have we always known that the water rate increases were not up to snuff?
So I'll answer first, and then Rick and Bill, if you could kind of jump on. So from my perspective, Andrew, historically on the sewer and water side, Jody went back and dug up all the way back to 2015. I said, don't go back too far. But we have used the water retained earnings fund to help balance the budget. And that's similar to the argument of using free cash to help balance our budget, to keep the tax rate low. And we've explored that at lengths in the past. On this end, the commissioners have decided to keep the rates low. I think the largest increase, and I think I say that in one of was back when we bought Jarvis Farm some years ago. There was like a 10% spike or something like that. Yeah, and I'm looking at the rate sheet on the water side. In FY16, there was a 10.31% increase. But it's if they decide to do nothing to keep up with what's budgeted, which is in my opinion, the bare minimum, they would need to increase rates about 12%. I honestly don't see the commissioners doing that. And that's why I kind of put a reference in this memo here that if they use approximately 200,000 from water, 200,000 from sewer, the rates will increase by about 5% rather than the 12%, which is in the balanced budget you have here. So Rick, Bill, you have anything to add to that one?
No, Jim, I agree that the commission has always tried to, be conservative with the rates and not raise them. They try to stay as close to 2.5%, 3%, 4% as they possibly can. The 12% increase that Jim just outlined in his memo, as he said, is without the use of retained earnings. And they've leaned heavily on the retained earnings for the past several years. The issue with doing that is that sooner or later that well runs dry, and it ultimately jeopardizes any major capital improvements that they want to make outside of borrowing. So we're working with the commission, Jim, and Bernie are working with the commission to try to get them to, a reasonable rate increase. I agree with Jim that 12% is absolutely out of the question. It's never going to happen. But I think if we could get them to the 5% and gradually increase, Andrew, to get us back to where we really should be, it would be best for the entire community and the department.
I'd like to just elaborate on the things. There's a couple things that I've been working on. I constructed the rate projection here and presented it to the commission. And it was based on where we were at the midpoint of this fiscal year. But there's a couple things that have changed over the actually last year and continue on this. In prior years, we were estimating 88 million cubic feet of water we were going to sell. It was really in the 70s, the high 70s, and has been drifting down. This current fiscal year, we're estimating 73 million cubic feet. And for the next year, fiscal year 22, I've said, all right, let's stick with the 73 million cubic feet. If you're selling less, that's going to cause the rate to go up. Or if you're continuing to think that you're going to sell 88, you're going to come up short. And as Jim mentioned, you make up the difference out of your retained earnings. So that's one of the things that attempting to make this more accurate, that's going to cause the rates to go up. Another item, and probably you wouldn't notice it unless you looked at the previous year's rate, we're now taking into recognition the fact that when the bills that are paid, or the money that comes in at the initial part of the fiscal year is based on prior year's rates. Example, if I use water in April, May, and June, and we bill quarterly, so there's 3 months, the earliest I'm going to put the bill out is in July. It's all rated as water used in the prior year rate, but it's recorded as revenue for the current fiscal year. So we now make that adjustment. So that's another thing that is causing it to go up. The other thing that I've been doing is letting the commission know how much water we're pumping each month, because it's really a leading indicator. And as I just indicated, if you're billing quarterly, it's what you're billing is you consumed 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months ago. And the other thing that we also been bringing to the commission's attention at each monthly meeting is the revenue. Where are we each month? And one of the things that's really stuck out on this year compared to what our estimate was, we were projecting the entrance fees were going to be $420,000. And right now we're at $54,000. I mean, around basically 1/10 or a little bit more than 1/10 of what we'd expect. And so when I was building the rates projections for this coming year, I said, instead of 420, let's be sort of cautiously optimistic and say 240,000. If it, and one of the things we got to look at is there's still, 4 months to go. And if construction starts to come up, then I think we're going to increase our estimate on new entrance fees. And I was just doing some arithmetic. If, let's say, we go with another $200,000 worth of entrance fees, and maybe we decide instead of 73 million that 74 really looks like it. And now I have the information month by month, I'm getting the detail. You could end up with not even having to use any retained earnings for the next fiscal year's budget. So the intent, what we've been doing is attempting to make it much more accurate to reflect reality. And there is some adjustments that are reflecting on higher rates, but I think we're getting closer to the point where we won't have to use retained earnings. And I've told the commission, don't get excited about a 12% rate now. The time to get excited is in June when we set the rates, that if we're there. But I'm expecting, and as Jim indicated, it looks like we may be 1% or 2% off. If construction picks up and we've got some entrance fees towards the end of the year, or it looks like they're building or starting to build, it's going to come down to a much more reasonable number. But the key is to make it accurate, and we definitely were not doing that in previous years.
Thank you, both Rick and Bill, for that detail. Just two quick things. One, I would be curious, not that it will affect how I vote on this budget, but about the monthly or the time series of water pumping in terms of the forecast. I just think that would be interesting to see if we put it on a town website or can share it through email. But the last question I want to ask this going into the meeting tonight, and I apologize if it's kind of a dumb question, but how has COVID affected water use in Walpole? Because, and this is just me being naive, maybe we talked about this last year, that if more people are home, would that affect, it seems like there's a decline in water usage because people are being more, are conserving more, but has that decline kind of abated or even ticked up? I'm just curious because of more people at home.
Well, I can answer that through you, Mark. What I've been doing is as far as the water projection, I've looked at going back to 2015 going forward. And if you look at the average for 2016, 17, 18, and then you compare what happened in 2019, we were pumping 10% less water. And that means we're not using, we don't store water, for the winter or something. We pump it as we need it. And that continued into 2020 at the beginning, but it then increased back to normal for between May and October. And now the last 3 months, we've gone back to being about 10% less than the previous. But as far as the impact of COVID, part of the increase may be in residential, and I do see an increase in residential because I can break it down, into the individual categories. You would expect in like May, June, and July, all right, we got a lot of people are working from home. I also saw a decrease in commercial, and particularly as far as the schools. The schools we consider commercial, nobody lives there. And there was some drastic reductions because no one was at school. So it's sort of a mixed bag right now as to what we're been seeing.
Thank you. That's all. No further questions. That everything you said makes a lot of sense.
I got Mark and then Ally.
Okay, I have a couple questions through you, Mark. So I'm curious, with the Water and Sewer Commission, are they independent bodies? In other words, do they control when retained earnings are used or not used, or do the selectmen? In other words, I'm just wanting to know who has the authority over that. Are they independent, or do they have to abide by what the town meeting would want them to do?
Town meeting is the one who appropriates money. And that's been a misunderstanding on particularly new commissioners who say, well, it's our money. Well, it's not. We cannot spend any money. We can't take money out of retained earnings on our say. We are not a water district. They're in some places which actually are independent government bodies. We are a part of the town of Walpole. We do have separate budgets. There's the municipal budget, the water budget, and the sewer budget. And that's because we operate as enterprise funds. But we don't get to arbitrarily say we want to spend money. If we want to use retained earnings, for a capital project, town meeting's got to vote it.
Okay, so what does, from the department standpoint, what do you consider to be a reasonable retained earnings? I'm looking at about 2.3 million in water right now, 2.1 or so in the sewer. And so, just how much does the department think is a reasonable amount to keep back in retained earnings?
Well, I'll let Rick answer that or add to my thoughts. Because unlike the property tax where, you can just assess, and I can't say, well, I won't use that back bedroom, lower my tax rates. People have a way of controlling their water. They can decide not to use more water or less water. I know because we have to balance our budget, it's important that we do have some retained earnings. And I know that Marilyn at one time said, I don't want you ever to go below 500,000. And in fact, just before I got on the commission this last time, we actually had to borrow money for, I think it was like $100,000 or something, and that's crazy. I don't like to see us borrowing anything less than 400,000. But it's important that we have it. Now, I know, Rick, you, I think, have some thoughts as to what is more of a realistic number rather than don't you dare go below, a certain number.
Right. So Mr. Chairman, it's always been the past accountants and finance directors that I've worked with have always recommended that we keep a minimum of 30% of the total operational and debt budget in the as retained earnings.
That's a standard
30% retained earnings.
Yes.
minimum.
Okay.
So based on this, so in this budget, you're talking about $1 million, just under $1.5 million.
Correct.
So what I was wondering was, with the retained earnings, is it more efficient to use some of that retained earnings to pay down debt in the water department than to keep it in retained earnings?
Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The other thing too is they do not have a stabilization fund or any other kind of resources. So retained earnings is at first their emergency fund. If for some reason something happened, they can come to town meeting and says, hey, we had a major water break, we had to fix it. Do you want us to borrow money or use our retained earnings and not incur the debt? But it could have been $1 million project. So they've only got two recourses, whatever's in retained earnings or borrowing money to take care of emergencies and so forth. So
Okay, but Mark, my question is, can the water and sewer department, the town has a stabilization fund. If they had an emergency like that, can they get money from the stabilization fund, or they're not allowed to mix?
that would be Board of Selectmen's prerogative to say, we're going to use municipal funds for the benefit of the enterprise fund. I don't think there's anything in our bylaws or charter that would prohibit it.
Can I
But-
chime in? Can I chime in? And I know
Yeah.
Jody, and I'm sorry, Mark, to cut you off, but I don't want you to give the wrong answer. We dealt with this back when we were certifying the free cash, and I actually had a question about this because my idea was, what if the sewer and water commissioners somehow don't balance the budget? And I was worried about that 9 months ago. What would happen? And Jody, I know you're on here. I believe the answer is they'd hit our free cash number up before we certified to close out the books for the prior fiscal year. Isn't that right, Jody?
So yes, what they would do if there's no funds available in retained earnings, the general fund has to cover for the enterprise funds.
So one way or another, the town, we're all under the same umbrella, would be responsible for covering that deficit because they want our books to close out balance at the end of the year. So we'd be on the hook. And I believe in the past, I think Pat Fasanellis mentioned that to me a couple times. So does that answer your question, Mark?
It does. It does. I was just, again, looking at the retainer. I find them fairly substantial and just wondering, what would be the minimum that we should have unless there was a big capital expenditure we knew that was coming up. The other question I have is more just operational. So in the water department, I'm noticing that there's about $100,000 in overtime between the overtime labor and the pumping station. And it just seems a fairly high amount. And I was just wondering, is that just a normal budgeted amount?
Bernie, you want to tackle that one? Or
That amount is generally, that's taken care of for all the holiday expenses. That's main breaks. That's any type of issue that goes down, things that go bump in the road that we have to pay overtime for our technicians to service our water treatment facilities and such. So that's where we get into our overtime. The more main breaks that we have, the more overtime. Well, main breaks after hours, the more overtime that we have to expend.
Okay.
So-
And my last question is on the MWRA assessment.
okay,
So-
we're not on sewer and water.
Oh,
Just,
sorry. Okay.
Bill, then we'll go to Ally.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Mark, the other Mark, to get back to your question about the retained earnings being $2 million. Right now, we're in the process of phase one of our skater update. The second phase is going to cost $500,000. We are also clean the distribution mains, or the mains that come from the pumps to the treatment plant, which if I recall, I think was at 400,000. Those are capital items that we see are, coming immediately in the immediate future. And all of a sudden that 2+ million drops down to, 1.23 million. So, the intent is not to just build up, retained earnings without any thought. As I mentioned earlier, when I look at anything that's $400,000 or less, I'm thinking we shouldn't be bothering borrowing and paying interest on it, as long as we can, keep retained earnings in a reasonable amount.
Okay. Thank you.
Just through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is Rick again to Mark Sullivan.
Yep, go ahead, Rick.
Relative to the retained earnings, just one final note. The retained earnings were not accrued as a result of excessive rates. The vast majority, if not all of those funds, came from connection fees of the very large projects that were just constructed throughout the town. The West Street property, the Liberty Village condos, Pennington Crossing, those contributed heavily to the retained earnings. Now we're at a point with COVID. I think Commissioner Abbott touched upon it, that we're a little concerned with this fiscal year's connection fees and what we propose to raise and what we are actually going to raise. There's going to be a dramatic difference, and that's because currently nobody is constructing. Now, in moving forward the next year or two post-COVID, that number is going to increase significantly again, because we got still some substantial projects that are about to hit the books. The Runmar Road Age Qualified Village, the Summer Street 40B, those projects will directly contribute to the retained earnings as a result of the connection fees. So I just wanted to make it clear that the retained earnings were not accrued as a result of charging excessive rates.
Right, no, that's helpful, thank you.
Mark, if I could if just in 2018, the entrance fees were $1,034,000. In 2019, it was $865,000. We were planning on 420, and as I mentioned, we were at like $54,000. So it really can, when these projects actually pay their entrance fees, can make a huge difference, and it's really not really under your control. It's when they decide to build.
Okay.
Yep. Ally?
Hi, thank you, everyone. Some of the things I wanted to talk about were answered. Looking over this, I'm quite shocked to see the 12% increase. And I mean, I realize that is not something that we're looking to do and everyone's going to work together. But I don't think anyone would support a 12% increase over 1 year when the averages are, 2 to 4% in general. So we were talking about some large projects coming up, and you kind of went over the entrance fees. When looking for revenue and talking about it's how much water is being sold, and that that's kind of where that number comes from. We're still doing the block rate system, correct? And are there different rates per levels? And are there other ways to somewhat manipulate either the hookup fees, or are we thinking that there's going to be more water being sold with all these projects and people being able to move into these larger projects?
Bill?
Yeah, I thought that question might come up. We do have 4 tiers. The first tier right now is $51.60 or 82 cents per cubic feet. And that's for the first 1,500 cubic feet that are used in a quarter. And had we stick with the flat rate, that rate would have been 22% higher. Because I have all the information for just looking at the past fiscal year, 76% of the residents are paying less than they would if we had the flat rate. And the reason is the philosophy on the inclining block rates is you want essential water, which is basically water used in the house, to be the least expensive. People who want to water their lawns and all, that's not essential water, and you're going to pay more. And also for the big water users, they're put a bigger burden, and so they pay at a much higher rate. So what we do is we, in the case of the, if it was a 12% rate increase, we apply that 12% to each one of the rates that in each of the tiers, so that we'll end up generating the amount of revenue. And the break-even point is 700 cubic feet into the third tier, basically halfway into the third tier. If you're using water less than that breaking point, you're saving money, and if you're at the other end, you're paying more than it would be if using the flat rate. So the whole idea is to give an incentive to conserve, and at the same time making those who are using water for non-essential uses or just put a bigger burden on the system are paying more. It is the standard way that rates are calculated. Over 3/4 of the towns and cities in the metropolitan area make use of this block rates. They don't use our rates. We don't use anybody else's. They're all over the place. When I first developed it, I took 12 communities that are right in our area, and I just listed their rates without the names of the town. And ours were right in the middle. It wasn't that ours stuck out in any way. So I hope that answers your question, Ally.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of put a lot in that one statement. So with the new, do you expect our usage with these new projects coming up, these large projects will be increasing?
Well, first, I don't think we're going to have a 12% rate increase. To build that 12% rate increase, I was projecting $240,000 of entrance fees. I think they're going to be much bigger, even if they were at the 420, which we had hoped for this year, which, there was no big projects, as Rick mentioned. That would have brought the rates down to around and if we had a slight increase in the amount of water that we think we're going to sell from 73 million to 74 million, that it ends up to being like a 2% rate increase using no retained earnings. That's why I've cautioned people, don't jump at this 12%. What it wanted to show is this is, if we were doing it today with these conditions, that's what it would be. And again, without using retained earnings, which is the objective. So
on those entrance fees, do we look at those, and are those increased kind of standardly each year as well?
They aren't increased every year. About 5 years ago, and it's about in that frequency, we hire an outside firm. So we're not just picking a number out of the air. We have to be able to justify how we came up with that. And I think it was Woodcox and Associates, Rick, that we used 5 years ago. And we probably should do it again. And it's sort of a complicated process of trying to say, what is the impact of adding another customer into our system? And it's also, part of it is also like if you join a country club, you're paying for the fact that there's all this 160 odd miles of water main and treatment plants and whatever that everybody else paid for.
And if I could just piggyback on that, the 12% number, Ally, was just, I wanted to be totally upfront with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And let you guys know, if we did nothing and nothing really changed, everything being equal, here's where it would be. As far as the entrance fees too, a year ago at this time, I thought we were going to get another hotel at Applebee's there by now. And, I never thought we'd pause everything. So it's more or less also about what can we anticipate upcoming over the next year or so. And these projects have to get, in and started and permitted, in that fiscal year. I know Rick reached out to that hotel and asked them what's going on with that. And I think they're waiting on an engineer or something. It's more or less what can we see forthcoming? And there's so many questions now about, how long are some of these projects going to be paused, or, are they going to be slower getting off the ground again? So it's a guesstimate too.
Yeah. I have one final thing that I just thinking about sewer and water. We see the crews all over town, different things are going on. Sometimes when these large projects are built, obviously there's plans for the sewer and water and the hookups. And sometimes things don't always go right. And years later, there's issues and problems. I know there's a development on Oak Street that's very old, but this summer, a lot of time was spent on the end of Lewis Ave and Oak Street working on that. I know on our street, Meadow Ridge, again, is an older development, but there were some issues with water, and we had a hydrant running for weeks upon weeks this summer in our street. So how is that looked at with these big projects? Have you found that some of these other developments, how are we kind of forecasting those larger projects in town? Does that make sense?
I guess I'm not.
I'm not.
Go ahead, Rick.
I'm not exactly sure, Ally, what
I'm not
you're
either.
asking.
I'm
Well,
not either.
No, I'm just saying, how are we projecting large projects in town that are more the unexpected? That maybe the problems, have come up slowly.
Well,
I could just say, whenever a project comes, and if it's a large project, we would have what the engineer for the project has developed. We would have them, the developer, the applicant, pay for peer review, and we would use Wright Pierce, who's our water engineer, Wesson and Sampson for our sewer projects. And, you know, we have hydraulic models that, you know, we can say, all right, this is what the system looks now. And now they're going to add so many extra gallons, you know, in this pressure zone. What does that mean? Do they have to make changes? I know for Applebee's, they're going to have to fix a stretch of sewer that's not even close to their project. It's down on Pleasant Street because of the additional sewerage. So I don't know specifically about, you know, the two streets you mentioned, Ally, but certainly the intent is that we know what the impact is on our systems. And
I guess that's like, how accurately can we project the impact on our systems, being that like those were from developments that were built like in the 80s and 90s, and our system is old. I know, I think there was a grant last year to kind of map out our system and things like that. It's more that after these projects are done, sometimes there's impacts on our system that we maybe could not project years later.
Well, we continuously look at capital projects. Rick did a fantastic job as far as working out in the distribution system, replacing old cast iron main and such. And that's going to continue to go. These new projects come in, they put in new infrastructure as well. So as Bill alluded to, we have a engineering firm that runs a hydraulic model. And so far, we've been able to make sure that we have enough water for the projects and such. And we're also addressing on the other end the aging infrastructure that we have in Walpole at this time. So as I said, over the years, Rick has done a fantastic job mapping out, you know, where these issues are as far as the old infrastructure and updating that as well. And that's part of our capital improvement projects. And actually, I'll be coming in front of capital, I believe, this fall for another phase of replacement. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I know, and I probably worded it in a way that kind of went on a little bit, but it's late.
Most of the impacts, Ally, are labor associated with the added infrastructure that typically comes with these subdivisions in these larger projects. So if it's a subdivision that becomes town-owned and under the control of the town, that'll put a little bit of stress on our labor resources and probably a minimal amount of expenses to maintain that particular section of the system. But I guess to answer your question, it doesn't really put a huge strain on the operation.
Okay. Final thing is going on with development and things like that, and then I'll stop. We are not, you know, for our water, for the MWRA, our own water system, which I think the water department does a great job keeping safe for our entire community. Is there a projection of what is the point that we no longer can handle and withstand from this all the development going on?
If you listen to, if you heard Commissioner Abbott's presentation as to where we're going with water usage, it's actually very flatlined or going down.
Okay.
We pump 300 million gallons less a year now than we did in the mid 80s. And that's as a result of low flow shower heads, water conserving wash machines, dishwashers, and other water sense certified fixtures. So people are very mindful as well of first of all, their bills as to what it's going to cost them. The vast majority of our water right now goes toward irrigation in the summer months, basically starting in May and ending early October. If you looked at what we pump for those that May to October period and compare it to the rest of the year, you'll see there's a significant difference to the tune of about 700,000 gallons a day. So I really don't see the large projects creating an impact on our ability to supply water in terms of demand.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Kathleen?
Through you, Mark, to determine if this is even appropriate for this meeting. But the last time we met with these fine gentlemen, we talked a little bit about billing. And I'm just wondering if somebody can give us an update on where we stand. I know it's anecdotal, but I can't tell you how many stories I read on social media saying, my bill is off the charts, and I called and they said, oh yeah, we billed you wrong, and they changed it. And whether or not any of that is legit, that there's a thought out there that the water and sewer billing is not right. So Mark, you can either
Sure.
tell me.
Bill,
Take it
you
off
can
my-
handle that, or
Mr.
should we
Rabbit?
pass it up?
Yeah, we do have a problem with the lag in billing. It averages right now with maybe 40 days after the meter has been read, and we're working on that. We do have a problem where, because of COVID, we need to replace some of our meters so that they work with the latest version of our remote meter reading system. And so now you're making estimates, and I've provided some spreadsheet tools to the folks in the office that make that an easier process for them. Another problem is that our billing is all clustered. We divide the town up into roughly 13 sections, but the bulk of them are done in January, in April, in July, and October. And some of those billing cycles are days apart, and you're dealing with hundreds of bills. And so we're working on a process of, can we just spread them out more evenly, and that will help the process. We also, the remote reading system that we have has a nice feature of that we're reading actually multiple times a day, but it will be able to detect that you have a water leak, and it will flag a bill. And those have to be addressed. And unfortunately, that process isn't all that intelligent, in that you have people who have, like myself, there's just myself and my wife. You go a couple blocks over, a couple houses over, and there's 6 people living there. And so we set a threshold at a level, and that sometimes gets triggered, and there's a process that has to go to get those things corrected before we can issue the bills. It is something that we're very consciously working on to shrink that, and that has an effect on the billing. As I mentioned earlier, April, May, June water gets billed in July on the old rates. Well, when you tack on another 30 or 40 days before the bill goes out, you're spending more time using the old rates. So in terms of and I'm not on Facebook, but I hear about it basically from the folks in the office, because they get flooded with calls. And usually what they're able to do is show, here's day by day when you use the water, and all of a sudden they go, oh, I guess you're right. Part of the problem is if you're getting your bill for your summer water in the fall, you've sort of lost the connection of that the sprinkler was running 2-3 times a week. It is something that we're working on, but the bills are accurate. That's not the issue. It's some things that we're really working on right now, and they're actually doing a good job in trying to shrink that billing lag down. And once we're able to correct some of these meters, we won't have to be estimating. And I think we've got maybe 400 or 500 meters that need to be replaced, but just can't get into the house.
Can I just, 2 comments? Thanks,
Sure.
Bill. First of all, I will say I've heard from a couple of people who have gotten that phone call saying your usage is up, and they were shocked and pleased that they got it. One was filling an ice rink, so it wasn't a leak, but he was just pleased that somebody noticed. So kudos on that. The other thing is, I really encourage whomever has anything to do with it to get that lag under control, because if at some point we do have to see an increase, hopefully we don't see the 12% increase, but we don't want to be annoying people before a rate increase comes. We'd rather have people pleased to know they're getting a good service, so they understand that this rate increase is not a mismanagement sort of thing.
Right.
And I think when you have people complaining about billing, well, they can't even get my billing right, you're already opening the door for complaints. So
Understood, and the people in the office know they cringe when one person says, "I got a real high water bill," and then they just get flooded with phone calls, and of course that slows the whole process down.
I imagine. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah,
Jeff?
Yeah, my comment was in line with Kathleen's. Bill, I just looking back, the April to July, I wasn't invoiced on that until October.
Yeah.
And the July to October invoice, I didn't get that bill until January, so it's still 90 days out.
The issue is if you're in cycle 1, it's shorter. Cycle 2, it's a little bit longer, and it's because of when they do it, if we can spread them out. If you're at a later cycle, and I'm in cycle 9, I have the same experience you do because I'm quarters of the way down the list of cycles, billing cycles.
The one that kind of really catches people though is that they get the April, May, June bill in September, and then in November they get the July, August, September. And it's like, well, just got a bill 6 weeks ago, and now you're sending me another bill. And that happened in the past. I think it might have been when we were on the 2-month cycles, that all of a sudden people were getting back-to-back bills,
right,
a month apart.
And that's why we had to go to the 90-day. We just couldn't do the 60-day.
Okay.
Hey, Bill, I've got one other question for you. If I look at the water rates, and maybe you can help me here. If I look at the published water rates, the first block 5182, second block 6672, 8896, 11119. How do you come up with what you have in the packet here for the actual rate you're proposing, the 7079?
Okay.
Is that an average of the block, or?
No, it all starts back. We used, when I came up with the blocks at the beginning, was one, I looked at what other communities in our area were doing. So sort of to get a sense of what were reasonable, the number of tiers and, how big the tiers were. I also did some research on, what was considered a good inclining block rate. And one of the things was essential water should cost less. And so you're going to get a break from the flat rate if you're using just essential water. And in fact, that's what came up. And then to actually see what it was, when I first started on the commission, and I've been at various times since 1982, we always thought of the average use was 12,000 cubic feet, because you just take the amount of water we pumped in the year divided by the number of customers, and that's what it came out to be. When I got the actual, and I was using 2017, and I could graph in it, it climbed up a hill and whatever, and I found that the peak was like 6,500. And so that's where I said, okay, divide that by, the number of bills that we're going to issue. So you take 6,000 divided by 4 quarterly bills, and you're coming up with that the first block is 1,500 cubic feet. And then there's a process of, the suggestion is, well, don't make the blocks beyond that too big, because the idea is, if I get into it, well, I might as well keep using water because, I'm going to pay the higher rate. So you want to make it a smaller block. And in fact, it goes from 1,500 to 900 to 1,375, and then it's from there on. So there's a lot of thought given into it. So once you've established that and you have a lot of data and can actually replay the usage and say, okay, I can come up with some values and rates that will generate the same amount of revenue. Then you've set the base, and then it's a case of, okay, from that point on, you figure out what percentage do I need to pay the expenses, and you apply that same percentage across all the tiers. So if it goes up 12% or 5% or 2%, all the blocks rates go up by that same percentage. There was one thing that we had initially. I thought that businesses, particularly the larger businesses, most of the businesses are, a branch of a bank. They don't use as much water as a house does. But for the larger ones, when you just think of it, it is essential to them. I got a lot of pushback from that, and we've been adjusting the commercial rates to match the residential, which is the way we had it at the flat rate. But it's sort of giving you a picture of how we arrived at the rates. They weren't just plucked out of the air.
Thanks, Bill. I guess my question though is the published rate for 2021 was 63.27, but how do I see that when I look at the 4 block rates?
Okay, that was a 4.78%. So that was applied. The rate previously, I think, for the first block was $49.45. And so if you applied 4.78%, that's where you came with the 51.82 and so forth. And so the second block, which I think, I want to say it's 63 something, well, you back off the 4.78, that's what it was, the previous rate. One of the things we're thinking of doing is on our website is to have a more detailed explanation so that people understand how we arrived at it. And, you know, I know it's kind of complicated, particularly on the bill. We try and cram in the comments section, you know, just one type of rates, and it's just a jumble of numbers. So I hope that answers your question.
Get it.
Anybody else with questions on Article 8?
Mark, I just have one comment. And I don't know if the others share this. A couple of years ago, we were in the town hall. There was a storm outside, and we were literally talking about emergency generators. And lightning struck. The center of town lost power. The emergency generators had to kick on. So this week, as I was preparing for the water department discussion, all I could see on CNN was these poor people in Texas. The pipes have burst, the water department, you know, the facilities have shut down, they're drinking bottled water. And I'm thinking to myself, how does Jim plan his agenda so he knows these natural disasters are going to hit, just as the finance committee talks about it? That's my
Mark, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
He actually is. He sent Donnie Anderson down into the basement to trip the breaker, Mark.
Yeah. I always look at the agenda now somewhat fearfully going, uh-oh, what's going to happen next week?
We do have provisions for both sewer and water generators that will take us through such cases.
Ally?
I'm good, Mark.
Yeah, her hand has stayed up on it.
Okay, I thought it just popped back up already. Any other questions on Article 8? And does your procedural question have to do with a vote on Article 8 or no?
No, it was more on 7 and 9. So
Okay, alrighty. So as Jim and I just brought to our attention earlier, we can vote the budget and just review the funding sources at a later date. If people are comfortable with the budget as presented for the $5,746,676, we can take a motion in a second and hold a vote.
put a motion forward. So moved.
Okay, moved by Denny. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Andrew. Okay. Let me get my notes in here. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for favorable action on Article 8. Denny,
Yes.
Josette,
Yes.
Ally,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Lucy still is not here. Brian,
Abstain.
abstain. Okay. Doug,
Yes.
Mark Sullivan,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Susan joined us at 7:10. Susan?
Yes.
Okay, and myself, yes. So we have 12-01 for favorable action on Article 8. Okay, let's go to Article 10, the Sewer Enterprise Fund for the next fiscal year. Alrighty. Bill, did you have any comments you wanted to do on sewer before we open it up to everybody else?
On sewer,
I know
maybe
Bernie gave
Bernie.
a nice little presentation, but
Okay, I mean, if you want to discuss the rates, I can just quickly go. Again, it's like a 12 or 11% increase. Again, the impacts were in the past we'd use 52 million cubic feet. Now, using real values, it turns out that a 48 million cubic feet is a more reasonable estimate based on actual values. The other thing is I mentioned on the water, that same thing applies, that April, May, and June water, or May, June, and July water, you're significantly using the prior year's rates, and so that's there. And to a somewhat lesser extent than what you saw in the sewer, the entrance fees are down.
just a real quick question on the volume. With the complexes that were completed downtown, are they 100% in this year, or did some of it start last year, or did they not start until mid-year this year for those new apartment complexes downtown?
Well, I think, Jim, you put in your budget presentation, I think that one of them is 40% occupied, another 20% occupied, the two
Yeah,
downtown.
those numbers sound about right. I did include that in each item, and I don't have, if you give me a second, I can pull it up.
No, I was just kind of seeing what we have for potential usage coming onto the sewer line. So basically, we're nowhere close to 100% occupancy in those downtown areas, which will be feeding the sewer system once they do go up in occupancy. But at this point, we're not even close to 100%.
Yeah, and the other thing is comparing the water use of a single family home versus a
Apartment,
one or two bedroom apartment. And they certainly don't have any landscape. There's just those potted plants out at the front as the landscape for the entire building. So
right, but on a sewer side, they're going to use the bathroom and the shower as equally as a person in a two-family
there won't be mom, dad, and the two kids and whatever. That's the. So definitely, you got 192 apartments when they're filled.
Yeah.
It is significant, but on a per unit basis, they're going to be the smaller than our single family home.
So, Mark, just looking at the message, it was Liberty Village. That was the one that's not at the train station. It's where the old Finnegan's Wake used to be.
Okay.
That was 22% occupied back when I wrote this in December. The Union and West, that's the one at the train station. That was 40% occupied. And then Pulte, which is where Woodworkers used to be, the first building's 80% occupied. Building 2 is still underway. They haven't started selling that one yet. 3 and 4 haven't started yet.
Okay. So there is a growth potential to help subsidize the rates down the road, just not likely for the coming fiscal year. Okay.
Right. And just one other growth potential, Mr. Chairman. The sewer is somewhat of a moving target, whereas water is somewhat stable. The two wild cards with sewer are the production at Hollingsworth and Vos and Siemens, the two very large contributors to the sewer system. I know Hollingsworth and Vos has slowed down somewhat on their production, and as such, their discharge has gone down as well. So hopefully those two industries will bring the flows back up.
Okay. Questions on Article 10 for the 2022 fiscal budget for sewer?
I just had one question, Mark.
Go ahead.
And it was regards to the MWRA assessment going up. Is that just basically a matter of volume, where putting more into the system so the rates go up?
It's pretty much dictated by the MWRA and their budget and how they find Walpole in their sites. Also, it does have to do somewhat with our population as well. But I believe that last year they gave us a bit of a break for their assessment, and the sewer and water commissioners did just about the same with their rates. But that is their assessment for the town of Walpole for this year. and Bill's going to add to that.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, through you, Mark. Just one thing is the MWRA assessment not only is based on volume, but they have the treatment plant out on Deer Island and over in Winthrop is getting older, needs to capital improvements. You know, when we look at our budgets, it's a very small budget. We have very few people. We don't pump we have some pump stations, but basically most of it's going gravity. So you look at our rates or the size of our budgets, and then you get this whopping big budget. We're not the capital improvements that have to take place for the treatment is all in the MWRA assessment, and we don't get to see those broken out like you would in the case of water, where water it's 100% us.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Jim, I noticed that we had a reduction in the interdepartmental charges. What municipal is charging back to those enterprise funds, was that staffing related?
Yeah, and it was to a few of the commissioners expressed concern over that in the past. And quite honestly, I want to keep a harmonious relationship with them. And Jody and I looked really closely at some of those, and I'm trying to be diplomatic as I talk. So we're comfortable with where they're at right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on sewer? So the town administrators put forward a budget for sewer of $5,312,764. If anybody's comfortable with that, we can entertain a motion. Moved by Denny. Yes.
Second.
And seconded by Andrew. Okay. We have a motion and a second for favorable action. In favor, Denny? Denny, are you in favor?
Yes.
Yes,
Am I on
okay.
mute? Sorry.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Steve?
Dave, say it again.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes, okay. Susan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Abstain.
Abstain. Doug?
Yes.
Mark Sullivan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
And myself, 12-01 for favorable action on Article 10. Alrighty. We will not be voting Articles 7 and 9. But I know, Bill, you've referred to where you think we're at. You've been monitoring monthly usage. Just by order of magnitude, what's a 1 to 2% shortfall dollar-wise that we might be looking at?
On a $5 million budget, what would that be? 50,000, 2%, 100,000?
Okay, so that basically be on each budget, the sewer and the water?
Yeah, and again, if we project construction to pick up, it might disappear.
Okay.
So,
Mark,
Yes.
why don't we can vote no action now, and then we can bring up
Well,
later if it's needed.
Well, as opposed to moving to reconsider,
Yeah.
we have until basically our second meeting in April to put things into the book. So as opposed to move to reconsider later, I would just rather gather the more information and just vote it once.
Okay.
Okay. Alrighty. I have received copies of the minutes for the fall. I had a couple tweaks that I'm going to be sending off to town hall. You should be seeing some minutes coming out to you tomorrow or possibly Wednesday, so we can add minutes to our agenda for voting, hopefully Thursday and also next week. We have public safety, which is police and fire on Thursday, along with employee benefits, and Jim just sent an updated package on that. Did you want to make any comments now or just hold off till Thursday? Jim?
You muted, Jim.
Yep.
Sorry, I keep doing that. My kids are fighting upstairs. I would just note that the health insurance, take a look through that. You may have a few questions. I know that's the same chart we've used in the past, but it can be confusing. I've been using it so long, I'm used to it, but just let me know beforehand if you have any questions as far as numbers, and of course I'll answer them on Thursday night. And the only other items in that line is the like the retirement system. So it's odd the way that those budgets have increased. Like insurance is only up 2.2%, but the overall line is up close to like 4.96%. So it's mostly related to the retirement assessment, I think, overall. So we'll go through that, then we'll go through public safety. We're gonna have the chiefs on there. Mike Yanovich is also gonna be on there, and we can get through that stuff.
Okay, and the school department has sent out copies of their budget packages. There's also books available at town hall, at the superintendent's office, and Walpole Cable's still going to be all set for next Monday also? Jim?
Yes, I believe so. Let me check with Tamara before I log off tonight. I'll shoot her a note.
Okay.
I did speak to Dr. Goth today, and she's prepared. I believe Nancy Gallivan will be on there too, and it's probably Mike Frisch of Bill Hahn, and they'll be ready to answer any questions. So we do have 2 nights scheduled for that, but yeah, it's pretty straightforward by now.
Okay. All right. Do they actually have a presentation, or they're just going to do the budget?
She was working on a PowerPoint when her and I talked today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Sewer and Water, for your input tonight. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Any other questions for tonight?
I just have one, Mark.
I got Josette first.
I noticed a lot of emails came in that people were having problems with the PDFs, opening them for the police department. Were you able to clarify those issues?
Yeah,
I'm picking mine up at the town hall tomorrow.
The chief resent an updated PDF, which seemed to work for several of us. I don't know if everybody had a chance to open up the revised one.
Okay.
I see a couple of people.
Everyone's giving the thumbs up, or so we look good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. And Mark?
Jim, if possible, through you, Mr. Moderator, Jim, if possible, could the fire, and I haven't looked at their material yet, maybe it's there, but just you having their organization charts is of assistance when I look through their budgets. If you could just ask them to update the ones they sent last year, that would be fine.
Yes, it's not in that packet, Mark, but I'll get that for you.
Okay.
No problem.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I could?
Sure.
I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for your support tonight. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Jody and Bill Abbott's worked feverishly on all of the revenue issues and such. And I'd like to thank Rick Mattson for his support as well, and Jim Johnson. So just thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Kathleen, did you have something too, or just a thumbs up to everybody? Thanks. Okay.
Everyone stay safe, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
There being no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Andrew.
Second.
Second by Steve.
Sure.
Okay.
Steve was going to do it.
Okay. I thought I saw his mic pop on. I heard a voice. Okay. And
He wasn't even here earlier, apparently. Now he's.
in favor of adjourning, Denny,
Yes.
Josette,
Yes.
Allie,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mark Sullivan,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and myself. 13:00. We stand adjourned until Thursday night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank-